What if I told you that the most respectful thing you can do for a body over 65 is not to move more, but to move with intention? Walking has long been praised as the safest medicine of aging, and in many ways it is. But safety without stimulus slowly teaches the body to shrink its expectations. Muscles listen carefully to what we ask of them. Bones respond only when they feel needed. The nervous system stays sharp only when challenged with balance and coordination. When movement becomes repetitive and predictable, the body adapts downward. This is not failure. It is biology doing exactly what it was designed to do. Aging, then, is not simply time passing. It is information being delivered to the body every day about what we believe it still needs to do. The body over 65 is not fragile by default, it is responsive. Every day, it listens quietly to the instructions it receives through movement, posture, and effort. Aging is often described as something that happens to us, but biologically, much of it happens through us. Muscles do not weaken simply because years pass. They weaken because the nervous system stops asking them to produce force. Bones do not thin out because time demands it, but because they are no longer challenged to remain dense. The body is an adaptive organism, and adaptation is morally neutral. It does not judge whether the signal it receives is good or bad. It only responds with efficiency. When movement becomes overly cautious, repetitive, and predictable, the body interprets that as a reduction in environmental demand. Walking the same route, at the same pace, day after day sends a very specific message. Balance will not be tested, power will not be required, rapid correction will not be needed. In response, the nervous system trims away what it perceives as excess capacity. This is not decline in the dramatic sense people fear, it is quiet optimization. The problem is that life itself does not become predictable just because we do. A misstep, a sudden turn, an unexpected obstacle requires reserves the body may no longer believe it needs to maintain. Aging, then, is not simply wear and tear. It is information. Every movement is a sentence spoken to the body, describing what kind of future it should prepare for. When we avoid effort entirely, the body prepares for less. When we challenge it intelligently, it prepares for more. This is why two people of the same age can have vastly different physical capabilities. Their biology is not different in principle, the instructions they have been sending for decades are. The body remembers patterns far longer than it remembers pain. It reorganizes itself around what is repeatedly asked of it. There is also a psychological layer woven into this biological conversation. When movement feels safe but unstimulating, confidence slowly erodes. The brain becomes less certain of its ability to correct errors, and caution turns into hesitation. Hesitation alters posture, gait, and reaction time, further reinforcing the original signal of limitation. This loop is subtle and often invisible until a moment arrives when strength or balance is suddenly needed and feels unavailable. By then, the body is not failing, it is obeying the narrative it has been given. Intentional movement changes the narrative. It does not require aggression or strain. It requires clarity. Movements that ask the body to stabilize, to produce force, to coordinate multiple systems at once reintroduce the idea that capability is still expected. They remind the nervous system that alertness has purpose, that strength still has meaning, that balance is not optional. Over time, the body reshapes itself around these expectations, not out of optimism, but out of biological loyalty to the signals it receives. Strength after 65 is often misunderstood as a pursuit of appearance or performance, when in reality it is a practice of self-reliance. The body does not measure strength by how much weight it lifts, but by how easily it can solve everyday problems. One of the most honest questions it ever asks is simple: can you lower yourself down, and can you rise back up without fear, without urgency, without assistance? This question appears dozens of times each day in quiet moments: getting out of bed, standing from a chair, using the bathroom, picking something up from the floor. When this pattern weakens, independence erodes not all at once, but gradually, almost politely. The act of sitting down and standing up is not a basic movement, it is a full-body negotiation. The hips must hinge, the knees must track, the feet must stabilize, and the spine must coordinate without collapsing. Beneath the surface, large muscle groups generate force while smaller stabilizers provide accuracy. The nervous system times this sequence with remarkable precision. Surgeons and rehabilitation specialists value this movement because it reveals far more than leg strength. It exposes balance, joint health, coordination, and confidence in a single motion. Training it, therefore, trains far more than muscle tissue. As we age, the body naturally looks for efficiency. If rising from a chair becomes difficult, it begins to compensate, pushing off armrests, shifting weight awkwardly, moving faster to bypass weak points. These adaptations feel helpful in the moment, but they quietly teach the nervous system that strength is optional and momentum is safer. Over time, this reliance on shortcuts reduces muscle engagement and increases joint stress. The movement becomes less controlled, not because the body is incapable, but because it has learned a less demanding solution. Rehearsing this pattern with intention restores a sense of trust between the brain and the body. Moving slowly under control tells the nervous system that stability matters more than speed. Each repetition becomes a lesson in confidence, not force. The muscles respond by regaining tone and responsiveness, while the joints benefit from improved alignment and load distribution. Perhaps most importantly, the brain relearns that standing up is not a threat, but a familiar and manageable task. There is something deeply human about this movement. Rising from a seated position is one of the earliest skills we master and one of the last we risk losing. Preserving it is not about fitness, it is about dignity. When the body can stand without hesitation, it reinforces a sense of agency that extends beyond physical health. Independence is not maintained through heroic effort, but through quiet competence practiced daily. In this way, strength after 65 is not built for the gym or the mirror. It is built for life as it actually unfolds. Balance is often mistaken for a matter of strong legs, but in truth it is a conversation between the brain and the body that depends on timing, perception, and trust. After 65, this conversation can become quieter, not because the muscles have forgotten how to work, but because the nervous system has fewer opportunities to practice staying oriented in space. Walking, especially when done routinely, allows the mind to wander. The feet follow a familiar rhythm, the eyes look ahead, and the brain is rarely asked to make rapid corrections. Balance, however, is not preserved through comfort. It is preserved through attention. Slow, deliberate marching in place reintroduces this attention in a gentle but meaningful way. Lifting one knee at a time requires the body to briefly support itself on a single leg. In that moment, dozens of small stabilizing muscles around the ankle, knee, and hip come online. At the same time, the inner ear reports changes in head position, the eyes adjust to maintain orientation, and the brain integrates this information to prevent sway. This is balance training at its most fundamental level, not dramatic, not risky, but deeply informative to the nervous system. What makes this movement especially valuable after 65 is its emphasis on control rather than speed. When the knee lifts slowly, the brain has time to process feedback. It learns how much force is needed, how quickly corrections must occur, and how to coordinate both sides of the body. This reduces the lag between perception and action, which is one of the primary contributors to falls. Many falls happen not because the body is weak, but because the response is delayed by a fraction of a second. There is also an important emotional component tied to balance. When people feel unstable, they subconsciously limit their movement. Steps become shorter, posture becomes guarded, and the body stiffens. This stiffness further reduces balance by limiting the body's ability to adapt. Slow marching helps reverse this pattern by building confidence in a controlled environment. Each successful repetition reinforces the idea that instability can be managed, not feared. Neurologically, this movement keeps pathways active that might otherwise fade. The brain is efficient, and unused connections weaken over time. By repeatedly challenging balance in a safe, intentional way, you remind the nervous system that spatial awareness is still required. This keeps reflexes sharp and coordination intact. Over time, this practice influences how the body moves in daily life, stepping off a curb, turning quickly, or recovering from a stumble. Balance, then, is not something you either have or lose. It is a skill that reflects how often the brain is invited to stay engaged with the body. When that invitation is extended regularly, the nervous system responds with adaptability and resilience, allowing movement to remain confident and responsive rather than cautious and restricted. Breathing is often treated as automatic and therefore insignificant, yet it is one of the most revealing indicators of how the body is aging. After 65, breathing tends to become shallow not because the lungs have lost their capacity, but because the structures around them have lost their willingness to move. The ribcage stiffens, the upper spine rounds forward, and the shoulders drift inward. This posture quietly limits how much air can enter and how efficiently oxygen can be delivered. Over time, reduced oxygenation affects not only endurance, but healing, cognition, and emotional regulation. Slow arm reaches combined with intentional breathing address this issue at its source. As the arms rise, the ribcage is gently encouraged to expand. The muscles between the ribs, often neglected, begin to move again. The diaphragm descends more fully, allowing deeper breaths without strain. This is not about forcing air into the lungs, but about restoring space. Surgeons and rehabilitation specialists value this approach because it respects the body's architecture. When movement and breath are synchronized, the body reorganizes itself around efficiency rather than tension. The spine plays a central role in this process. The thoracic spine, located in the upper and middle back, is designed to rotate and extend. With age and inactivity, it often becomes rigid. This rigidity affects shoulder movement, neck comfort, and breathing depth. Gentle reaching encourages the spine to lengthen and rotate in small, controlled ways. Over time, this restores mobility that supports better posture and reduces strain on the lower back and neck. There is also a profound nervous system effect embedded in this practice. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is responsible for recovery and repair. This shift reduces chronic muscle tension and lowers stress hormones that contribute to inflammation. When combined with smooth, deliberate movement, the body receives a signal of safety. This is particularly important after 65, when the nervous system can become biased toward vigilance due to accumulated stress and physical uncertainty. The psychological impact should not be overlooked. Expansive movements counter the inward posture that often accompanies aging and self-protection. Reaching upward and outward reinforces a sense of openness and possibility. It subtly changes how a person occupies space, influencing confidence and mood. This matters because mental state affects movement quality, which in turn affects physical health. Restoring breathing and posture is not about performance or aesthetics. It is about re-establishing the fundamental rhythm that supports all other movement. When the body can expand and contract freely, it functions with greater ease. Oxygen reaches tissues more effectively, joints move with less resistance, and the mind remains clearer. In this way, something as gentle as coordinated breathing and reaching becomes a powerful tool for sustaining vitality and resilience later in life. After 65, the body no longer responds best to quantity, it responds to clarity. Doing more is not the same as doing what matters. Repeating a single, comfortable movement for long periods may feel productive, but the body adapts quickly and then stops listening. Precision, on the other hand, keeps the nervous system engaged. When movement requires attention, alignment, and control, the body cannot drift into autopilot. This is why carefully chosen exercises can outperform hours of walking in preserving function and resilience. Walking primarily challenges endurance. It does little to ask the muscles to produce meaningful force, the joints to stabilize under load, or the brain to coordinate complex actions. As a result, critical systems quietly underperform. Strength declines, balance becomes less reliable, and coordination slows. These are not cosmetic losses. They are the systems that determine whether a person can recover from a misstep, carry groceries, or rise from the floor. Precision-based movement directly addresses these vulnerabilities by asking the body to solve varied and realistic problems. When a movement is slow and intentional, the nervous system receives detailed feedback. It learns how the joints align, how the muscles fire, and how balance is maintained. This feedback refines motor control, which reduces unnecessary strain and improves efficiency. Precision is not about perfection, it is about awareness. Awareness allows the body to adjust before injury occurs. It also builds confidence, which influences how freely a person moves throughout the day. There is a philosophical shift embedded in this approach. Instead of treating the body as something that must be pushed or preserved, it is treated as something that must be communicated with. Each intentional movement becomes a message that capability is still expected. Over time, the body reorganizes itself around this expectation. Muscles regain responsiveness, joints regain trust, and the nervous system regains adaptability. Precision also respects recovery. High-volume activity can accumulate fatigue and irritation, especially in aging joints. Targeted movement delivers benefit without excess wear. This allows consistency, which is more important than intensity. A body that moves well a little each day maintains function far better than a body that moves a lot without purpose. Perhaps most importantly, precision restores dignity to movement. When actions are deliberate and controlled, the individual feels present rather than reactive. Movement becomes an expression of self-care rather than obligation. This mindset encourages long-term engagement rather than short bursts of effort followed by withdrawal. Aging does not require retreat. It requires refinement. When movement is chosen with intention, the body responds not by resisting age, but by adapting intelligently to it. Precision teaches the body how to remain useful, responsive, and confident in a changing landscape.